she's across from my desk, we're getting to know each other, we're flirty, nice, it's all this is going, and she's across the desk and she takes a piece of paper, turns it around and she pushes it to me and said, please say yes. I was so mesmerized, I don't remember Gary, just remember the girl.
Have you ever thought about what happens when one of Hollywood's hottest stars finally tells the woman he secretly wanted the truth? 76-year-old Richard Gere, who played the lead role in Pretty Woman, just did. There are 6 statements that show the real person behind the fame and the charm. Listen closely, because what he said will shock you. You'll want to hear everything Julia Roberts. Julie Roberts was her name. When Pretty Woman came out in 1990, it wasn't just another romance comedy. It was like lightning struck the screen. Julia was only 22 years old, and she had wide eyes and nervous laughter. Richard, on the other hand, was already a Hollywood celebrity, and he was cool, calm, and collected. But as soon as they were in the same frame, something happened that neither the director nor the camera could have planned. That smile is still talked about. The way Julia smiled warmed the room, not just lit it up. Nobody was able to hold back around her, not even Gere, who had spent years getting good at being in charge. You could see him loosen up when she laughed. Something flickered that wasn't doing anything when she looked up at him. People in the audience felt it right away. The chemistry was so real that it almost made you feel bad to watch. People on the set talked about it behind closed doors. It felt like a real bond. As Gere once said, her laugh made him forget where the camera was, and you can see it on screen. The quick looks, the stops that last too long, and the smiles that look like they hide something. They shared something that wasn't in the script. It was a beating that got through. Julia was innocent and dangerous at the same time, which was something Gere hadn't seen in years. She wasn't acting like everything was fine. She tripped over words and made jokes that even she didn't see coming. But she smiled like nothing could hurt her. But there was a spark and confidence in her that made it dangerous for anyone to think less of her. For someone who had spent decades around well-groomed Hollywood types, that honesty hit him like a ton of bricks. Pretty Woman was more than just a movie. It was about a guy who bought love and found it instead. People saw what they thought was going on behind the scenes in it. It wasn't Edward looking at Vivian when Gere looked at her in that elevator. It was Richard who was lost for a second. The dream and the real world became so mixed up that no one, not even they, could tell the difference. Julia had a strange kind of strength. She made love look easy, but she was never foolish. It seemed like she could be weak one moment and strong the next. Gere knew that balance better than anyone else. He had been successful in his own work because he had a dangerous heart hidden behind a calm face. That could be why they clicked. The rest of the world was just starting to notice that she was a woman whose smile could be both soft and fiery at the same time. It was almost scary when they were together, not because they crossed lines, but because you thought they might. It was fun to watch them get closer and wait for them to forget about the cameras. There was life in the air between them. When fans watch the necklace scene or that last kiss in the rain again, after years have passed, they still wonder if any of it was fake. Julia wasn't just another co-star for Gere. She reminded me that you can't fake connection, and that when certain people come into your life, you stop acting and start living a bigger life. He liked how, despite her fame, she stayed true to herself and never tried to be the Hollywood goddess that everyone thought she was. Her warmth put him at ease. Her presence scared him, and her laughter lasted longer than he thought it would. It wasn't about lust or gossip. It was just interesting. She made him feel young, free, and happy, which he hadn't had time to feel before. Being able to work with her broke him out of his shell. She got him interested again and reminded him of what it was like to really feel something instead of just acting like you did. That secret was in every look they gave each other on TV. Both moved on to new jobs and lives over the years, but fans always linked their names. Perhaps because, deep down, everyone knew that the relationship wasn't fake. It was two real people touching on something and pulling back before it got too rough. Pretty Woman has stood the test of time because of that strain. It wasn't about the happy finish in the script. It was about how exciting it was close. Julia Roberts was the one who showed Richard Gere that magic could still work in a business based on lies. She told him that a look could say more than a word, that laughter could be more seductive than words, and that the most powerful love stories aren't always the ones that happen. Years later, the way he talked about her made him feel both thankful and sorry. Thankful for the moment that changed how everyone saw him, and sad that some links will only live on in our memories. Julia was the spark that showed desire doesn't go away. It turns into memories, which is much more dangerous. But the next woman was the flame, not Julia. Lisa Lane, the one you can't have. The woman who used her desire to make art almost burned down the screen. Diane Lane. Diane Lane was like a fire that almost put out Richard Gere's charm, if Julia Roberts was like a spark that lit it again. Everything changed the moment they stepped on the set of Unfaithful. The movie was supposed to be about betrayal and guilt, but what it really showed was the heat between two people who knew too much about temptation. Gere was older, quieter, and better in charge at that point. He had spent years learning how to control his feelings on screen, how to act like he was in love while staying away from her. She was dangerous in a way that didn't scream, but whispered. With just one look, she could blur the line between what was real and what was staged. The air got denser every time the camera moved. They didn't use words or big movements in their scenes together. The breath in between looks and the quiet said it all. The story made you feel pain, lust, and the strong urge to want something you shouldn't have. Gere didn't have to act out that struggle. It was already inside him. Like heat rising from asphalt, he could feel it in the way Diane moved and filled every frame. Something hypnotic about her was going on. She was naturally beautiful and didn't need any lights or angles to make her look good. Diane could just stand there and make everyone look at her. She wasn't a character. She was the storm. Still, Gere was right in the middle of it all, even though he was otherwise calm. In Unfaithful, he plays the husband who is cheated on and loses everything because of a weakness that wasn't his own. But behind the scenes, the comedy was stronger. Gere wasn't thinking about being harmed. He was thinking about what it would be like to want someone so badly that it scared him. Even a seasoned actor forgot for a moment about the cameras when he saw the way Diane looked at him in those scenes and how her voice softened right before she turned away. They didn't have the kind of energy that burns quickly and then fades. There was a slow fire going on, the kind that stays lit even when the lights are off. There was more truth in every close-up and tentative touch than either of them probably meant. Gere later said it was tough to get rid of that energy. It stuck with him even after filming was over, like a bad dream you don't want to remember. Different from Julia Roberts' fun dream, Diane stood for something else. It was danger, experience, and depth that she was. Julia had been a mix of innocence and laughter, and Diane was a mix of desire and understanding. She didn't play the young dreamer. She played the woman who knew what she wanted, but still wanted it anyway. Gere was totally drawn in by that balance of being open and in charge. He had to face his own limits when he worked with her. His whole being wanted to close that career gap, so how could he do it? When the feeling got too real, could he separate the part from the feeling? He fought a quiet fight in every scene. His mind tried to pull back, but his heart inched forward. Diane was memorable not only because she was beautiful, but also because she was so serious. She could make everything else fade away. You couldn't look anywhere else while she was in the room. In the past, Gere said that she was the kind of woman who made you nervous for no clear reason. Being worried wasn't a sign of weakness. It was recognition. He knew he had found the right person, both as an actress and a person. The way they were connected in Unfaithful made the movie more than just a story about cheating. Being able to control your desire for something you can't have, while also knowing that you'll always want it, was something that was studied. What made the movie powerful were the feelings that were not shown, the ones that were just below the surface. That's what Gere thought about the most. For him, Diane Lane stood for when desire and maturity met. She showed that desire doesn't go away with age. It only gets worse. She was the forbidden flame, beautiful because no one could touch her, and unforgettable because they almost did. When he talked about that show, his voice was full of both admiration and unfinished business. Cut means the end of some jobs. Some people never really let you go. People can still feel the honesty, the pain, and the pulse of something too close to real when they watch Unfaithful again after years have passed. In the world that Gere and Lane made, sorrow and love danced together, and neither one of them was strong enough to stop it. That's the kind of chemistry that only happens once and stays hot for a long time. Michelle Pfeiffer. The much more dangerous Michelle Pfeiffer was like ice that burned if you touched it. Diane Lane was like fire wrapped in temptation. She had an air of calm about her that could make a room quiet. Every step, look, and pause looked like it was planned, but it never looked forced. Michelle did not need to ask for recognition. She already had it just by being there. Richard Gere saw her as the most mysterious kind of draw, one that was based on interest rather than chaos. She didn't talk too much or flirt. She was calm, focused, and a little hard to touch. It was like seeing lightning stuck in glass. It was beautiful and under control, but you knew that if you got too close, it could break you. Gere liked women who were strong but didn't show it, and Pfeiffer was one of those women. Even though she was very pretty, her real strength was her brains. She wasn't trying to be better than anyone else. She was already bright. Gere saw the right mix of beauty and danger in her, an elegance that could calm you down while you thought about whether to be scared. Not from a movie they made together, but from his mind, there was a scene he would never forget. 2 cups of wine, a dinner table, and soft light. Michelle was sitting next to him and barely spoke. She was just watching. It was hard to read her eyes because they were cool, steady, and closed. There was no need for her to say anything. It would be enough for the silence to speak. Her skill was that she could scare you without ever raising her voice. The kind of woman who could make you look at her until you told her things you didn't want to discuss. Gere's whole career was based on being in charge, so he knew how rare that was. At work, most of the women tried to match his charm, but Michelle was stronger because she didn't have to. Everything was a challenge for her because she was calm and sure of herself. It wasn't a shout that said, "Pay attention." "If you dare," was said in a whisper. She always walked a fine line between being close and being far away in her acts. At one point, she looked so weak that she might break. The next day, she got so cold that time stopped. That lack of certainty interested Gere. She told him that mystery, not beauty, is what makes someone attractive. Beautiful Michelle was only the surface. What drew people in and wouldn't let go was her depth. In the past, Gere said that some women make you wonder what would happen if you got too close. Michelle Pfeiffer made that thought come true. She was the kind of woman who could see right through you and see things you didn't want other people to see. But you'd still want her to keep looking. She was both muse and mirror on TV. She made every man's dream even more dangerous and sharp by reflecting it back at him. Her beauty was a mask, and her silence was a warning. There would have been too much friction between them if they had ever worked together on a movie. It wouldn't have been just because they were passionate about each other. There was something very intelligent about the way she kept desire alive. It wasn't about taking over or causing chaos. It was about becoming aware. She was aware of how she made people feel and never played it up too much. Being able to control herself like that made her more attractive. Gere spent his whole life surrounded by beauty, so that kind of quiet power was rare and memorable for him. Most people didn't notice this about Michelle, but he did. She wasn't trying to be attractive. There was something about her that made everything else quiet down. For her, a look could be a dare, and a smile could be a promise. Less is more was a saying that became very important to Gere. People leaned in closer, the more she held back. He was most interested in how calm she was while still being so strong. He wasn't drawn to the fire. It was the cold air before her, or it. She stood for a different kind of danger, one that doesn't show itself. She was like a calm ocean that could swallow you up before you knew it. Michelle Pfeiffer was the perfect contradiction for Gere. She was warm in a cold world, dangerous in a graceful one, and curious in a calm one. Like many other fantasies, hers wasn't based on chaos. Instead, it was on control, which made her impossible to refuse. When he turned around and looked at her, he realized that his interest in her was also to desire to chase the flame, but to understand it. She told him that desire could be quiet, even intellectual, but still strong enough to make a man lose his cool. But the next woman in Gere's story was nothing like Pfeiffer. She was the mystery that stopped time. She wasn't cool or far away. With her fiery personality and daring smile, she was a woman who not only drew attention to herself, but owned it. Susan Sarandon. Susan Sarandon was the storm that wouldn't stay inside. Michelle Pfeiffer was the mystery wrapped in style. When she walked in, the room was already quiet, so she didn't have to do anything. Everything about her was loud without making noise or being brave without trying. She had a heat that didn't need permission to be there. It just was. Susan Sarandon had a different kind of power for Richard Gere. Her sensuality wasn't polished or practiced. It was real, alive, and a little scary. It was the kind of woman who looked you straight in the eyes and made you feel both seen and naked. That confidence could shake even the most calm guy. And even Gere, whose image was built on being charming and in charge, couldn't escape it. He liked her not only because she was pretty, but also because she was brave. There were never any quiet rules for Susan in Hollywood. She spoke her mind, cared about politics, and was extremely independent, traits that scared some and fascinated others. Gere saw what he called rebellion made flesh in her. She didn't, but she dared you to like her. She did it to test you. She wasn't attractive because she was perfect. She was attractive because she was honest. She stood for how unpredictable desire can be. Control didn't mean much to her. You could either fight her fire or get burned by it. Gere knew that balance, that thin line between being strong and giving up. Susan easily lived it. Not only did she not chase you, she'd dare you to get closer. Because if you did, you had to be ready to give up something, like your cool, your pride, or even your sense of reason. There was something alluring about how she wouldn't play small. A look could become a sentence, and a grin could become a spark. Gere often said that some women made you think about what might happen, but Susan made you sure that something would. That was what made it different. It wasn't a fantasy. She was a confrontation, a live reminder that desire isn't always easy. On screen, Sarandon was always ready to fight. She made love seem like a political act in movies like Thelma and Louise and Bull Durham. She felt that spirit with her everywhere she went. The thing that Gere admired most about her was her courage to be herself in a world that often liked silence. He said once that you don't have to handle Susan Sarandon because she isn't there. It's when you give up that you finally understand what power is. Control and surrender were linked by the strain between them. Gere had spent his whole life getting good at controlling himself, but Sarandon broke it, not by luring them in, but by refusing to give in. People thought about what they were hiding and why they were keeping it from her. He was excited about that task. That woman wasn't her. She was the one who walked right through your dream and woke you up. For Gere, she stood for the wild side of attraction, the point where desire is no longer safe. She wasn't fragile or hard to touch like the others. She was fire and flesh, the kind of person who reminds you that passion isn't meant to be neat. And that's exactly why he could not forget her. When he talked about her years later, he always had a smile on his face that said more about respect than love. Sarandon wasn't a dream she wanted to have. She was a force he was glad to see. She taught him that when a woman is strong, he should bow down to her, not fight her. It's not always whispered that wooing works, and she was proof of that. It will sometimes laugh at you, dare you to take a chance, and say you won't be the same afterward. That brave person was Susan Sarandon, the queen of the rebels who made living up look like freedom. Sharon Stone. Sharon Stone was the kind of woman that made you ready for something bigger than just looking at her. The way she looked didn't invite, it challenged. It was intentional, sharp, and dangerously accurate, the kind of thing that could break any man's calm. Richard Gere, who had seen all of Hollywood's glamorous versions, couldn't stay away from her. She was a live symbol of power wrapped in beauty. She not only played the femme fatale, she made it what it was. Sharon made flirting an art form and used confidence like no one else in Basic Instinct and Cathatsino. Every look and smile was planned out and timed just right. She was aware of how she affected people and used that knowledge to her advantage. Gere liked how in charge they were. You didn't get that kind of power. You made it yourself by not being afraid and believing in yourself. For Gere, Sharon was the most interesting kind of danger. The kind that dares you to approach while also threatening bad things will happen. She didn't wait to be wanted. She made it happen herself. She had a beauty that didn't change or give way. It looked back at you and made you wonder if you were strong enough to face it. He liked more than just how she looked. He liked the way she thought. She was cold-hearted, but she was actually very smart, quick, and very aware of how the game was played. Being smart made her even more attractive. Her beauty made Gere see himself in her. She knew how to act, keep things under control, and walk that fine line between confidence and chaos. When she went to events for her business, she always made a stir. People did more than just look at her. They responded to her. She could quickly change the temperature of a room when she walked in. It looked like every move said, "I know what you're thinking, and I'm deciding if it's worth my time." That amount of power wasn't pride, it was command. And Gere was interested in that order because it came naturally. She wasn't trying to be strong, she just was. She was dangerous because she was both seductive and authoritative, and she was both graceful and intimidating. The guys around her didn't just want her, they wanted to lose to her. Sharon Stone was one of a kind because she could make giving up look attractive. Gere knew exactly what he meant. He once said, half jokingly and half seriously, that she was worth at least one scandal. It wasn't about the act itself, it was about the thrill and risk of being caught by someone who could think better than you and look better than you. The best form of control was shown by her. Sharon used silence to get people's attention, while others used charm. Her lack of words gave her more power, and her restraint made things more tense than any explosion could. Gere thought it was amazing that she could stand still and still own the moment. She didn't need approval. Her confidence made people want to be with her. That feeling of fear came from being real. It was impossible to stay away from her because she didn't try to be liked. Her optimism wasn't an act. It was a way for her to stay alive. She had been through the worst of fame and still stood taller. Gere appreciated that because he knew how hard it was to stay true to yourself in a world that wants to change you. Sharon Stone was the perfect mix of beauty and power, and Gere wasn't interested in her out of lust. He admired the rare kind of woman who could run a room without doing anything. She was ice that hurt, light that made you blind, and desire that made you brave. But even though all of these women were strong, there was one that stood out. Not because she was the most beautiful or scary, but because she would always be there. The next person on Gere's list was a woman whose appearance changed what it meant to be remembered. The Queen of Rome, Sophia Loren, was the woman he once said he would follow through fire. Sophia Loren. Every woman who came before Sophia Loren was a different shade of desire. She was the creation that put them all together. She wasn't made up. She was real. Her name alone carried the weight of the golden age of movies, when beauty wasn't made in studios or with filters, but by being there. Sophia was already perfect. She didn't need to try. The way Richard Gere talked about her made her sound holy, not shady. He would always dream about her, not because of what she did, but because of who she was. A femininity that demanded respect before it made people want to be with her. The mood changed every time she walked into a room. There was no noise or clapping after her. Instead, there was a quiet awe, as if no one wanted to break the spell. When she went to Hollywood events, Gere would watch her from the crowd, trying to figure out how to feel about her. Sophia Loren didn't just walk, she floated, as if the world moved at the same speed as her. Every tilt of her head and knowing smile reminded him that a woman was truly attractive when she was sure of herself and knew how much she was worth long before anyone else did. That kind of beauty doesn't last. Hers was built on confidence and life experience. She was both fiery and calm, like a mother, but also dangerous like a queen. Gere once said that she was the kind of woman who made men feel young again, and women remember what it was like to be strong. That paradox, tenderness wrapped around steel, was what made her stand out. A glance from her could make a room feel better, and a word could destroy it. Gere saw her as both impenetrable and painfully real, like a dream that felt like a real person. He told himself that if Sophia had ever called his name, he wouldn't have walked to her. He'd have run through fire. If you enjoyed this deep look into Richard Gere's timeless confessions, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click the next video popping up on your screen. You'll definitely want to see what's next.